To the folks I worked with in Cook County Jail's Sheriff Women's Justice Program, SWJP. It's been 3 years since I last saw you, and the world is a different place. I write this to you from the sunken cushions of my living room couch during the 9th month of this global pandemic. Winter has finally set in. My knees know it. The trees know it. The neighborhood is filled with the sound of that cold Chicago quiet. You know. I know you know. And as I sit here sipping on warmth, I stretch my mind to remember the sounds of you. Talking to your babies on the phone, giggling with your lovers, cackling with your friends, telling that perfectly hilarious story one more time. Asking me to play that song one more time, firmly patting words of encouragement into each other's backs, rubbing them into the skin with circles, circles, one more time. The sounds of you told fuller stories than any courtroom could ever claim. To hear you, to hear the symphony of your parts, was an honor and a gift. I will continue to hold these stories with reverence and keep them like I do the letters and cards you gave me throughout the years. They stay protected in the bottom right drawer of my grandfather's creaky wooden desk. When I run my fingers over the sheets of paper, I can hear you writing in the hallways, your heads dropping back for breaks against the walls like those tipping buckets when they overflow with water. I can hear you sealing the envelope, handing it to me before I leave the unit. I can hear your gratitude, my difficulty receiving, our two ways of knowing how hard it was for the other one to be vulnerable. It was my job to see you, sure, and we know everyone saw everyone on the inside. 1,000 walls to that cage and completely exposed. Well, this is my letter to you now, printed and sealed for the handoff. I know most of you will never see this, but in some cosmic way, I hope you hear it echoing through the cold Chicago quiet, reminding you of the value in your symphonies. From here forward, what I write is both to you and to the ones reading this book. A love letter of sorts to both sides of trauma work. The client, the clinician, and the space between us. To be honest, I have no interest in clinical terms or doctor speak, and yet I've agreed to write about trauma, dance movement therapy, and criminalization. This is hard to write not because of the topics, but because of the constraints. There's so much to say, so many stories to share in so little space and time. A bizarre parallel process to everyone who's been called to the witness stand. How do you fit in the symphony? I suppose I'll do as I preach and offer what I can, the best I can. So here is my truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. There were 3 things I learned from my years in county that I would like to share with you here today. 1. Theory means nothing if you don't have good consultation and know how to sit in your own shit. 2. That heavy, empty, frenetic, perhaps even addicted thing you're feeling is called vicarious trauma, and it's not your fault. 3. The resilience of human beings will bring you weeping to your knees, and that is both a gift and a profound loneliness. 1. I spent years learning about the chasing approach to dance movement therapy, relational cultural theory, Judith Herman's 3-stage model, and every tidbit I could pull from Levine, Ogden, and van der Kolk. The only thing that I can say actually mattered when it came time for me to show up for you was the extent to which I knew how to slow down and breathe. On days when I was dysregulated, it simply didn't matter what I knew up there. It was about what I could do down here, in the heart and in the gut. The other brains, the places I neglected first and needed most. This is not to say that theory is useless, but perhaps its best hope is to steer us in the right direction and start us off on the right foot. Continuing down the path is one that requires so much more than theory, so much more than anything I could have ever imagined. 2. The mark of a good therapist, they say, is one who doesn't support you in blaming everyone else for your problems, but rather guides you in taking responsibility for your actions. Accountability. The rough edge for me was that I was still on the hill of feeling like it was their fault. The slave patrols that turned into police forces. The capitalist elite who designed for-profit prisons. The racist government officials who built cities made of isolation. I blamed all of them and more. I blamed the school-to-prison pipeline, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the criminalization of poverty, the man. Was this helpful to you? No. Should I have gone into policy instead? Probably. It was hard for me to focus on holding you accountable when I raged for the accountability of the state. Prisons were not made for rehabilitation, they were made for profit. Just as the Western world of mental health was not made for healing, it was made for treatment. The amount of trauma produced and supported by the criminal justice system and buttressed by interlocking systems of oppression is utterly mind-blowing. And the effects ripple to everyone who can't afford their own escape. Nothing proves that more than the relationship between the spread of coronavirus cases and correctional facilities. To the helpers and healers reading this book, vicarious trauma is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. I'll save you the talk on self-care and share this instead. It took me an entire year to read Trauma Stewardship by Lipsky because I was either too tired to turn the page or too mad at her suggestions. I wasn't choosing to do this work. I had to do this work. Stuck in grandiosity, persecution, and a nasty cycle of cigarettes, coffee, and one more drink, please. I didn't see what was happening until I left. That's not true. I did see what was happening, but I was out of tricks and committed to the trade. The first time I cried on the job was when I was sitting on the steps and you told me how you were booked for theft. You stole diapers for your baby sister because your mom couldn't afford them. You were 19 then. We sat with our elbows perched on our knees, shoulders hung below our ears looking out on the unit floor. You started talking about music and we cracked up about the new release of something I can't remember now. I walked off the unit during lunch, went to the bathroom and cried. No, I wept. The therapist cell in the jail was a bathroom. Accountability. I couldn't do it. Did I eventually learn how? Yes. Was it painful? Absolutely. 3. Resilience can be summed up in the sounds of you stepping onto the dance floor with me, falling in love with her, and belly laughing through the proverbial bars that simply couldn't contain your spirit. I learned from you that joy was possible not because of your circumstance, but in spite of it. I learned that joy was a Beyoncé-themed Follow the Leader line through the halls of Division 17. I burned CDs with all your favorite songs like it was high school again, and I was just as excited as you were. Every single time. We erupted, do you remember? For each track like we were listening to the radio in the back of someone's beat-up car. Just as cramped and boxed in, but we spilled out of these windows, and it was everything. For a moment, for a track, dare I say it was fresh air in our hair, face to the sun, cruising down Lakeshore Drive. Dare I say for a moment we got free. Looking to the officer waiting for us to finish and get in line, I put my finger up in protest. One more time. Vicarious resilience was when I learned how to sneak in more than just CDs, which I hid inside my DSM. As it turns out, surveillance technologies can't pick up the people's music through the density of politics in that book. That was 2014, and it was the year of sunflowers, mini pumpkins, and multicolored glass marbles for, mindfulness. I figured I'd keep bringing the outside in so we could keep moving from the outside in. You told me stories about the last flowers you got and the ones you never gave. We laid on fields of pushed-together desks listening to 1976. You played Loves Me, Loves Me Not with the petals plucked from your memory of lovers. 2014 was when I learned how to listen. And sometimes, I listened well enough to watch for the petals your fingertips skipped over. Not everything got talked about. And I didn't push. When I had the privilege of going home each night after work, my partner at the time would ask, "How was your day?" How was my day? Such a simple question that felt nearly impossible to answer. Therapists, you feel me. Sometimes I try to describe the flowers, the symphonies, but more often than not, I stumbled and paused and left it at fine, good, a lot. Not everything got talked about, and I didn't push. Trauma is a lot, and trauma work is too. The weight, the beauty, the mess of it all, and the task of undoing it. What I know now is that the best predictor of a good therapist is one who is truly supported by their team and loved hard enough that they can get out of their own way. Trauma work should never be done alone, and yet even in the best company, it can yield the deepest loneliness. You don't have to be a therapist to feel that, and to get it, and to know exactly what I'm talking about. Whatever it is we're doing here, be it treatment or healing or just getting by one day at a time, I want to believe there's another way. There are other ways to do this. I see it happening here and there, and for the places I don't, I vision it. Put on 1976, spill out the windows into the light, and let pleasure take me to the place where you and me can happen freely. It's a mess there too, but there are no threats of scarcity. No rush and care. Just petals safe enough to be plucked and talked about. Meet me there. Let's have a dance. One more time.